Brazil 5, Sweden 2, June 29th, 1958, Råsunda Stadium. The boy who scored the last two had just turned 17. The psychologist said, "Don't pick him. This is the World Cup that made him Pelé." Let's go back 8 years. If you saw episode 5, you know about the Maracanazo. Brazil lost the 1950 World Cup at home. 200,000 people watched. The country went silent for years. 4 years later, Switzerland. Brazil reached the quarter-final and lost to Hungary in what historians call the Battle of Bern. 3 red cards, a brawl in the tunnel. We covered it in episode 6. So by 1958, Brazil had been the best team in South America for 2 decades and had won exactly 0 World Cups. Newspapers ran columns asking whether Brazilians were psychologically unfit to win one, whether something in the national character was the real opponent. So when the Brazilian Football Confederation built the 1958 squad, they did something nobody had ever done before. They brought a psychologist with them. This is the story of a country that decided to win, and how a 17-year-old boy became the proof. His name was João Carvalhães. He was a psychologist from São Paulo, and the Brazilian Football Federation hired him to do something nobody had done before. He gave every player on the 1958 squad a psychological evaluation. 300 tests across 22 players, personality profiles, authority response patterns. The team trained in Poços de Caldas, a mountain spa far from the press. Carvalhães wrote reports, and when he handed Vicente Feola his final selection report, 2 names had big red marks next to them. One was a winger from Botafogo nicknamed Garrincha. The psychologist wrote that he was not psychologically fit for international football. The other was a 17-year-old from Bauru. The psychologist wrote that he was too immature to handle the pressure. Feola read both reports. Then he picked both players. The 17-year-old's name was Edson Arantes do Nascimento. You know him as Pelé. One quick thing before we get to the tournament. This is how every team in Europe played in 1954. The WM formation, 3 defenders at the back, 5 forwards. The shape spells a W and an M on the pitch. Hungary played it. Germany played it. England invented it. Brazil arrived in Sweden playing this. 4 defenders, 2 midfielders, 4 forwards. It was a different sport. We will explore the tactical revolution it caused and how it became the template for the next 30 years of football in a dedicated episode in the Tactical Evolution series. For today, just remember, Brazil brought something nobody else had. Now, let me set the stage. Sweden hosted this World Cup. They were chosen by FIFA Congress in 1950, 8 years before the tournament. Their case was simple. They had stayed neutral in the Second World War, so their infrastructure was intact. They had won Olympic football gold in 1948, and their national team was now coached by George Rayner, an Englishman from Yorkshire who had built one of the best football programs in Europe. 16 teams qualified from 53 entries, 4 groups of 4. Top 2 from each group advanced to the knockouts. If second and third tied on points, a playoff decided who advanced. The British nations all qualified: England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Only time in World Cup history, all 4 British nations have been at the same tournament. Italy didn't make it. They had lost their qualifying playoff to Northern Ireland. First World Cup Italy had ever missed. And it wouldn't be the last. Uruguay didn't make it. The 1950 champions, knocked out by Paraguay. Spain didn't make it either, eliminated by Scotland. Two nations were making their World Cup debuts. Northern Ireland, most of the squad, were part-time professionals, including miners and bus conductors, and the Soviet Union, making their first ever World Cup appearance. 16 teams, 12 Swedish cities, 12 stadiums, 35 matches, 3 weeks. Brazil were drawn in Group 4. Their group had England, the Soviet Union, and Austria. Here is the rest of the bracket. 4 months before this World Cup began, a plane crashed in Munich. Manchester United's team plane, returning from a European Cup match in Belgrade. 23 people died. 8 of them were Manchester United players. The team was called the Busby Babes. 3 of the dead were England's first-choice players for this tournament. Roger Byrne, the England captain, Tommy Taylor, the centre-forward, and Duncan Edwards, who, at 21 years old, was already considered the most talented player England had ever produced. Bobby Charlton survived. He was on the plane, but pulled clear of the wreckage. He arrived at the World Cup, grieving and injured. So when you watch the England story at the 1958 World Cup, remember they were not the team they were supposed to be. And Northern Ireland's goalkeeper at this World Cup was a man named Harry Gregg. He was a Manchester United player too. He had survived Munich. Before the rescue services arrived at the crash site, Gregg had run back into the burning wreckage 3 times. He pulled out a pregnant woman, her baby, and several other passengers. 4 months later, he kept goal for Northern Ireland in Sweden. He was named the best goalkeeper of the tournament. Group 1. West Germany, defending champions. Argentina, the South American giants. Northern Ireland, World Cup debutantes. Czechoslovakia, the future Eastern European force. West Germany opened with a 3-1 win over Argentina. Helmut Rahn, the hero of the Miracle of Bern, scored. Northern Ireland upset Czechoslovakia 1-0. The Northern Irish keeper, Harry Gregg, kept his first World Cup clean sheet 4 months after Munich. Czechoslovakia drew their next match with West Germany 2-2. Argentina beat Northern Ireland 3-1. The defining moment of the group came in the third match day, Argentina versus Czechoslovakia. The Argentinians were a tournament favorite. They had Alfredo Di Stefano-level talent on paper. Czechoslovakia destroyed them, 6-1. Argentina's worst defeat in any World Cup, before or since. When the Argentinian team flew home, they landed at Buenos Aires airport to a hostile crowd. Fans threw coins. The team retired from the national side. Argentina did not reach a World Cup semi-final for the next 8 years. Northern Ireland and Czechoslovakia tied for second on 3 points. They played a playoff. Northern Ireland won 2-1 in extra time. The Cinderella story of 1958. West Germany topped the group. Northern Ireland advanced from a group they had no business advancing from. Group 2, France, Yugoslavia, Paraguay, and Scotland. Scotland never won a match. They drew one with Yugoslavia and lost to Paraguay, one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. They went home first. France opened with a 7-3 demolition of Paraguay. Their striker, Just Fontaine, scored a hat-trick. 25-year-old, born in Morocco, played for Rams in France. Nobody knew it yet, but Fontaine had just begun a tournament that would write him into history. Yugoslavia beat France 3-2 next. Then France ground out a 2-1 win over Scotland. France and Yugoslavia advanced with 4 points each, separated by head-to-head. We will see Fontaine again in the semi-final and in the third-place match. His final tournament tally, 13 goals across 6 matches, is still the most any player has ever scored in a single World Cup. 66 years and counting. Group 3. The host, Sweden, Hungary, Wales, and Mexico. Hungary in 1958 was a shadow of the team that had reached the 1954 final. After the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, half of the magnificent Magyars had left the country. Puskás was at Real Madrid, Kocsis and Cibor were at Barcelona. Hungary at this tournament was a young rebuilt side. Wales was playing in their first ever World Cup. The Welsh squad had a tactical fluency from coach Jimmy Murphy, who was also assistant manager at Manchester United and had been at the Munich crash. Sweden cruised through the group. 3-0 Mexico, 2-1 Hungary, 0-0 with Wales. Wales held Hungary 1-1 in their opener, then drew Mexico, then drew Sweden. 3 draws and an extra point in the standings. Hungary and Wales tied on 3 points. Playoff. Wales won 2-1. Wales had reached the World Cup quarter-finals on their first attempt. They would not return to a World Cup until 2022, 64 years later. Their wait was the longest in football history. Group 4. Brazil, the Soviet Union, England, and Austria. The Soviet Union was making its World Cup debut with a 28-year-old goalkeeper from Dynamo Moscow named Lev Yashin. He would become the greatest goalkeeper of his generation, maybe of any generation. He saved a penalty in the Soviets' opening match against England. The match ended 2-2. Brazil opened with a 3-0 win over Austria. Their attack was still in second gear. Pelé and Garrincha were on the bench. Vicente Feola was still listening to the psychologist. Match 2. Brazil versus England. 0-0. The only goalless draw of the entire 1958 World Cup. England, the country that lost 3 first-choice players at Munich, the country that had not won a competitive match against Brazil yet, the country that had to rebuild its entire forward line just months before the tournament, held the future world champions to a stalemate. Match 3, Brazil versus the Soviet Union. Vicente Feola walked into the dressing room. He looked at the team list. He picked up a pen. He crossed out 2 of his trusted veterans. He wrote in Garrincha and Pelé. This was the 17-year-old's first ever World Cup match. Brazil won 2-0. Garrincha hit the post twice in the first 10 minutes. The Brazilian attack was now in full motion. Brazil topped the group. England and the Soviet Union tied on 3 points. The Soviet Union won the playoff 1-0. England went home. The Munich Shadow had won. The knockout rounds, quarter-finals. Brazil drew Wales. France drew Northern Ireland. West Germany drew Yugoslavia. Sweden drew the Soviet Union. The Soviets, debutants in their first World Cup, were knocked out by the host in front of 32,000 Swedes at Råsunda. 2 goals from Kurt Hamrin, a Swedish winger who played his club football in Italy. France beat Northern Ireland 4-0. Fontaine scored 2 more, his 7th and 8th of the tournament. West Germany beat Yugoslavia 1-0. The defending champions were through to the semis. Brazil played Wales in Gothenburg. For 72 minutes, Wales held Brazil scoreless. The Welsh keeper, a man named Jack Kelsey, was making save after save. 73rd minute. A ball is played into the Welsh box. A 17-year-old in a yellow Brazilian shirt takes it on his chest. He lifts the ball over a Welsh defender with 1 touch. Half volley, past Kelsey, Pelé, 17 years and 239 days old, had just scored his first World Cup goal. 66 years later, it is still the youngest a player has ever scored at a World Cup. Brazil won 1-0. Brazil to the semi-final. The semi-finals were 2 days apart. Sweden against West Germany in Gothenburg. Brazil against France in Stockholm. The Sweden-West Germany semi-final got controversial fast. The Germans were defending the title from 1954. They had lost a midfielder to a knee injury in the first half. Then a German defender named Erik Juskowiak was sent off at 59 minutes for a kick at Sweden's Hamrin. The Germans played the rest with 9 fit men. Sweden won 3-1. The Germans accused the Swedish referee and the Swedish team of dirty tactics. There were dropped microphones in the post-match press conference. It became one of the most bitter post-match scenes in World Cup history. The Brazil-France semi-final was the opposite. Fontaine scored first, France 1-0. Then Vava and Didi for Brazil, 2-1 at the break. Then Pelé took over, 52nd minute. Pelé picks up the ball at the edge of the box, shoots low, 3-1, 64th. Pelé in the box, lifts the ball over the defender's leg, tucks it past the keeper, 4-1, 75th. Pelé wide right, cuts in, smashes it across the goal, 5-1, 3 goals, 23 minutes. Fontaine got one back at 83, his 12th of the tournament, 5-2 final. Brazil to the final. Pelé had scored a World Cup semi-final hat-trick at 17 years old. Nobody had done it before. Nobody has done it since. Third place playoff. France versus West Germany. France won 6-3. Just Fontaine scored 4. That brought his tournament total to 13 goals in 6 matches, an average of more than 2 goals per match. 66 years later, no player has scored more goals in a single World Cup. The next closest, Sandor Kocic, 11 goals at the 1954 tournament, which we covered in EP06. Fontaine's leg was broken in a Sporting Lisbon match in 1962 at age 28. He never played football again. He died in 2023. His record still stands. One more thing before the final. The 1958 World Cup final was Brazil against Sweden, the host country. Sweden plays in yellow. Brazil plays in yellow. 2 yellow teams cannot play a final. FIFA has a rule. The visiting team has to change. The visiting team was Brazil. The problem, Brazil had brought no alternate kit. They had not packed for this. So the morning of the World Cup final, the captain Bellini and a couple of staff went to shops in central Stockholm. They walked in. They bought plain blue shirts. They took them back to the team hotel. The staff hand-sewed the Brazilian crest, the federation badge, onto every shirt, with needle and thread. Hours before kickoff, Brazil walked onto the pitch at Råsunda Stadium in those hand-stitched blue shirts, and they won. Blue, after 1958, became the official Brazilian backup color, because they won the only World Cup that mattered to them in those shirts. Every time you see Brazil's away kit, you are looking at the day they bought the shirts in Stockholm. June 29th, 1958. Kickoff at 3 in the afternoon. Råsunda Stadium. Just over 49,000 Swedes inside. 40 million Brazilians watching from home or listening on radio. The entire country stopped. Imagine being a Brazilian fan that day. You have watched your country lose the World Cup at home in 1950. You have watched them lose the quarter-final brawl in 1954. You have lived for 8 years with the question of whether your nation was psychologically broken. And now, your team, coached by a calm, cigar-smoking strategist named Vicente Feola, is in a hand-stitched blue kit, 90 minutes from the trophy. The Swedish team was not a small story either. Their coach was George Rayner, an English football journeyman from Yorkshire who had coached Sweden since 1946. He had won Olympic gold with them in 1948. Now he was in his 11th year leading them and on the verge of a World Cup. His starting 11 included 5 players who played their club football in Italy: Lidholm and Skoglund at Milan and Inter, Hamrin at Padova. His captain, Gunnar Gren, was 37 years old. Goalkeeper Kalle Svensson at 33. Sweden was a team of veteran professionals. The anthems played, Brazil in blue, Sweden in yellow. The whistle blew. 4 minutes in. Niels Lidholm, Sweden's vice-captain, scores. 1-0 Sweden. The first time Brazil had trailed in the tournament. 9 minutes. Vava levels, 1-1. 32 minutes. Vava again, 2-1 Brazil. And then, 55th minute. Pelé picks up a ball in the box. A Swedish defender named Bengt Gustafsson is between him and the goal. Pelé lifts the ball over Gustafsson's head, flicks it with the outside of his right foot, catches it on the half volley as it comes down, past goalkeeper Svensson. 3-1. If you have ever seen a Pelé clip from the 1958 World Cup, you have seen this goal. It is one of the most replayed goals in football history. 68th minute. Mario Zagallo on the left wing. 4-1. 80th minute. Agnes Simonsen pulls one back for Sweden. 4-2. The crowd takes a breath. 90th minute. Brazilian corner. The cross comes in. Pelé climbs above two Swedish defenders. Header. 5-2. The 17-year-old runs back toward the center circle, crying. Final whistle. Brazil had won the 1958 World Cup, their first. 8 years after the Maracanazo, 4 years after the Battle of Bern. The country that thought it was broken just won, with a 17-year-old crying in the center circle, in hand-stitched blue shirts. The 17-year-old who walked onto the pitch at Råsunda Stadium became, by the time he retired, the only football player ever to win 3 World Cups: 1958, 1962, 1970. Brazil went on to win 5 World Cups in total, more than any other country. The boy in the blue shirt became simply Pelé. On June 29, 1958, the World Cup final was broadcast live across Europe. 8 countries connected via the Eurovision network. The first World Cup the world watched together at the same moment. Until 1958, football was a stadium sport. You saw it live or you read about it the next day. After 1958, it was a global broadcast event. Pelé became the world's first football star anyone could watch from their living room. The tactical innovation, the 4-2-4, became the template for the next 16 years of football. And the country that had been called psychologically broken became football's romantic identity. The country whose blue away kit you can still see, 66 years after Captain Bellini bought those shirts in Stockholm. 1958 was the World Cup where football became global, where the boy in blue became its first king, and where television started rewriting what a sports moment could be.